Hello, and welcome to the Lewiston Tribune podcast. This is episode number 29. I'm Kerri Sandaine, a reporter for the Lewiston Tribune, and today we're joined by a very special guest, Jackie Nichols. She's a detective for the Lewiston County Sheriff's Office, and she's going to tell us everything about some cold cases and the latest developments. But first, I have to give you this reminder that the Lewiston Tribune podcast is available at lmtribune.com on YouTube and anywhere you find podcasts, Spotify, Apple, all of them. So I got that out of the way. So welcome, Jackie. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you.
As the Lewiston County Fair approaches this month, we are reminded of something horrible that happened in our small community in 1979. And that's what kind of kicked off these cold cases. And if you don't mind, could you give us a little rundown of those cases?
Sure. First off, thanks for inviting me to be on your podcast. I appreciate it. I think a lot of people in this area are very familiar with the cases, and I won't go into a lot of information about them. But just kind of the overview is in April of 1979, 12-year-old Christina White disappeared from the small town of Lewiston and was never seen or heard from again. And so I think that was kind of a turning point for our area, which, at one time felt safe and secure.
Absolutely.
And to have, a child go missing like that. And then in the next few years, there were some more horrific crimes, disappearances and murders that kind of changed the tone, I think, for people living here. And one of the tough things about it is that those cases have never been solved.
Right.
So that's kind of where I come in, 20 years later as a new detective and eager and anxious to try and solve these cases. I started working on them, and of course I started with the Lewiston County case of Christina White. And so she had gone to a friend's house on a Saturday morning, the weekend of the fair, and she had called her mother and said she wasn't feeling well, and her mom had just put her little sister down for a nap, and so she said, get a cold washcloth, cool down. When you get to feeling better, walk your bike home and I'll watch down the road for you. Mm-hmm. And she never showed up. And so her mom thought, well, she got to feeling better and went on to the fair. Mm-hmm. And this, of course, was in the days before cell phones. And
right.
All of that. So.
And the carnival was still going on then, right?
Yes. Yeah. Typical Lewiston County Fair time.
Right.
Warm day. Yeah. And so her mom thought, well, she got to feeling better and went on to the fair, and she'll come back later. And she didn't. And so, when she didn't show up for dinner, which was very unusual, her mom began looking for her, and then, it just spiraled from there.
Right. Yeah. That, there's a lot of people in Lewiston who remember that day vividly. And I know you've worked hard on these cases. I've been in Jackie's office, and she has notebooks, and you've been on Dateline and other shows about this. This is a very high profile case, and my wish is that before you retire that you solve this.
Me too.
Yeah.
And of course, when I first started on it, my wish was to find that thing and solve it immediately.
Right.
And then I really hope to have those answers for Christina White's family and for her parents, who are still living when I first started working on these cases. And unfortunately, I was not able to find those answers, and her parents have both passed away. And so, but I'm still hopeful that these cases will be solved, and I believe they will. And I too would like it to be done before I retire.
Right.
But I do believe, regardless of whether it's before I retire or after I retire, they will be solved.
I love that.
Yeah.
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 Hopeful. Yes, that's great.
I believe they will.
Good.
my hope now is that, maybe there can be some accountability, that, a person can be held accountable. But again, time is passing, and, that may not happen, but I still believe the answers are out there to be found.
Oh, that's great. And I remember we've worked together 20 years. We've been on many scavengers, whatever you want to call it, throughout the countryside looking. We looked for Rachel Anderson everywhere. And that's kind of how we got to know each other. And I know you're very dedicated to this, the cold cases. And can you tell us about, there were 3 others in this string of crimes?
Right. So, and there is a lot of open source information about these cases. So again, I'll just kind of gloss over them. If people want to look into them further, that, you can get online and
Right. There's a ton of stuff. Yes.
Yeah. But in 1981, there was another young woman who went missing. She was riding her bicycle from Moscow, Idaho to Lewiston, Idaho, disappeared. And her remains were found a few days later, and she'd been, it was horrific. She'd been dismembered and thrown into the river. And so her remains were found. It was really a terrible, horrific case, and that case has never been solved. And then and that was Kristen David.
Right.
And then in 1982, 3 people disappeared on the same night from Lewiston. And that was Stephen Pearsall and Brandy Miller. Her full name was Jacqueline Miller, but she went by Brandy. And then Christina Nelson. And Christina and Brandy were stepsisters, and they had left that evening to walk to the grocery store and were never seen again, or not seen alive again. Right. Their remains were found. Stephen Pearsall disappeared that night and was never seen again. And kind of the linking factor to all these people are all the 3 in Lewiston and Christina White are linked to the same suspect.
That's what I was wondering, if you thought it was the same person of interest.
Yes, yeah, with that, the Asotin one and the Lewiston one. Kristen David from Moscow, maybe, not ruled out, but doesn't have as clear of a connection as the other cases do.
Oh, that's interesting. I remember watching you on Dateline and seeing it was like a brown van or something that picked her up on the highway, possibly.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
With Oregon plates.
There's been, when I went back through the files and looked at all the various things, there were several people that reported having seen a brown van in the area with a young woman with a bicycle. It's difficult because I think there were actually more than one young woman riding her bicycle that day. So
true, yeah.
There's reports at different areas of a young woman on a bicycle wearing different clothing and things like that. But there were several of this brown van and a woman with a bicycle near Genesee on the highway between Moscow and Lewiston. And the time frame kind of fits and all of that. So, and yes, there may have been Oregon plates, but again, I think pretty much every Oregon plate in the state of Oregon was run at the time.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Brown van and things like that. And unfortunately, it just didn't come to any kind of fruition.
Right. So now that you've caught us up on the cases that people are probably familiar with, what's the latest that you can tell us that in your investigation?
Yeah, so for me, I've been focusing more on the DNA aspect of it. That's kind of the big new deal that's solving cases, and especially a lot of really old cold cases. And so in our cases here, we have very, very little what we call crime scene DNA or suspect DNA. That's the DNA that the suspect leaves behind. And in our cases, we have small micro amounts of DNA, but not enough to develop a profile. So people ask me, well, couldn't you get your suspect's DNA in some manner or some way. That isn't the problem. Getting the suspect's DNA is not the problem. The problem that we have is that our cases don't have a profile to compare it to.
Interesting.
So it's kind of backwards. Most of the time in cases, there will be suspect DNA left at a crime scene. And when they say left at a crime scene, what it really means is like bodily fluids left at a crime scene. So if you have a cold case where there was a sexual assault, then you're going to have semen. Like that's not just somebody casually walking by and leaving their DNA. That is good suspect DNA. Or a lot of times in stabbing cases, we'll have blood left behind by the suspect because in the course of stabbing, suspects often cut themselves. And so, if someone leaves blood at the scene, that's very strong suspect DNA. Right. And then there's a lot of times they save the fingernail clippings or scrapings from the fingernails. So the victim was able to scratch the suspect and get their skin cells under their fingernails.
Right.
So that's what I mean when I say crime scene DNA or suspect DNA. Very strong evidence left by the suspect on the victim or at the scene. And that's what we don't have. So a lot of cold cases have that, but they don't know who that person is.
Right.
And so they, they're trying to figure out who that is, where we know who the person is. We just don't have the crime scene DNA to connect that person to it. So what I've been doing is trying to find other cases, because this suspect's been linked to other cases around the country even, that perhaps there are cases out there that our suspect was involved in and did leave crime scene DNA at. And so it's a matter of kind of going case by case to try to find those unsolved cases and talk to them and see if they have crime scene DNA.
How's that going? I mean,
it's slow.
Okay.
It's slow. And, I have a whole current caseload to work on too.
You do, yes.
So a lot of times I have to look at this stuff in my off time. And, if I have a slowdown in my regular caseload, which hasn't happened for a couple of years. So it's slow. And there is a national database, and states have databases of DNA, and it's a great tool, but it's not a tool that's accessible to law enforcement like people kind of commonly believe.
Right.
So it's called CODIS, is the national database for DNA, and it contains the DNA of known offenders. So if you've been convicted of certain levels of crime, then your DNA gets taken and it gets entered into this database in case you've committed other crimes. It also has, some detectives have entered their crime scene DNA into this database. And so what happens is it's running, and when a convicted offender's DNA gets entered and there's a crime scene DNA in there, it matches up, and they'll say, oh, this same offender left his DNA at this crime scene. But you can't just enter someone's DNA into this database to see if it matches up.
Why not? That would be so helpful.
It would be. Yes. Because there's a lot of laws regarding DNA. DNA it's kind of a new technology. It's evolving and evolving and evolving. And in my opinion, the law has not evolved quickly enough with it. So when DNA was first being developed and discovered and used, a lot of laws were put in place to protect people and protect their rights, and I totally get that. But at the same time, it limits me as a police officer from being able to use this really powerful tool that exists.
Yeah.
Because the laws don't allow me to compare a suspect's DNA with unsolved crimes.
That would be amazing if you could just do that. Plug that in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What can happen with our government to help you if they change the law or?
Right. It would be a major change. I have talked with people about doing just that, and it's kind of a difficult issue because DNA is private. People feel very private about your DNA because it does contain a lot of information about you, medical information, things like that. My argument is if you haven't left your DNA at a crime scene, you don't have anything to worry about.
Right.
And when I say leave your DNA at a crime scene, I'm talking about blood, semen, skin cells, like
Spit,
under
whatever,
the fingernails of a
Right.
a victim.
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, even if you enter your DNA doesn't have your personal information. Like, it's a series. When it goes into CODIS, it's not, oh, it's Kerri Sandaine. It's these numbers. And they're matching these numbers. It's not saying, then we have to find out, oh, these numbers match.
Mm-hmm.
Then we still have to find out who they belong to. And that's kind of where the genetic genealogy comes in.
Well, a lot of people have entered DNA into those databases now. And I think that's one of the things that helped police charge Brian Kohlberger in the murders in Moscow.
Mm-hmm.
He's still innocent until proven guilty, but DNA played a huge role in that case. So if your suspect has a family member who did that, can you access that?
Well, it depends.
Okay.
And as these DNA companies have evolved, they've put processes in place to protect people. So people can now say, no, law enforcement may not use my DNA. And they have to specifically request that law enforcement can use their DNA.
Oh, interesting.
So it's actually getting more difficult to utilize it. Yeah.
Have you ever done that, like 23andMe and?
I have, but that's I'm not afraid of learning about my DNA or who I may be connected to, and I understand why people are. I totally do, but I also don't see a harm if you haven't left your DNA at a crime scene.
Right.
And the types of crimes we're talking about are homicides and rapes.
The worst of the worst.
Yeah. Right. CODIS doesn't contain unsolved crime scene DNA from thefts or blue-collar crimes. But I can see the potential where, someone would argue the other side and, say, well, Big Brother is going to use this. And,
Who has argued that?
You. We've had this discussion
many times.
So,
and for the record, Jackie did do a DNA test on her dog. It was very interesting.
Yeah. And I have on myself. I've seen what my ancestry is and all of that. But of course, I'm biased on the side of trying to solve these cases. And
Right. Well, that's fascinating. So with the fair coming up, I think this will be back in the news. I mean, it always is, and it's been 46 years, if my math is right. I interviewed the parents of Christina, too, and heartbreaking case. Absolutely. It's every parent's worst fear. I mean, I live out there. Soton's a safe community, you think, and their kid goes down to the fair on their bike and goes to the carnival and never returns. And it absolutely rocked our valley. And then these other, 4 victims?
Yes.
Well, if we count the Moscow bike.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it still happened in our community, whether it was the, different suspect or same suspect. These horrific crimes impacted our community.
Absolutely. It's just been, everyone wants this solved. And I am pinning my hopes on you. No pressure, okay. But I think you can do this. I've seen your notebooks. They're this thick, you guys.
Yeah. If I can, I will.
She works really hard on it. And I really want to thank you for coming here today and sharing the latest. We keep these kind of short. I know you could talk about it all day.
I could.
I know you could. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to say about these cold cases before we sign off?
Not that I can think of, but if people do have information or if they have questions, they can contact me at the Asotin County Sheriff's Office. Our office number is 509-243-4717, and I'm extension 6 in the phone tree. Or you can email me Sometimes that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. And my email address is my first initial and last name, J. Nichols, all run together, at asotancountywa.gov.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I really liked talking to you about this today, and I'm glad you shared that DNA stuff with us. That was important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.